Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Live Better Connected podcast. Now we've got a special one today because I'm on site at the data communications company, and with me I have Penny and Stev. So Penny, first, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Penny Brown. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DCC.
DCC, and Stev?
Welcome, I'm Steve Erwet. I'm the Chief Strategy and Regulation Officer for the Data Communication Company. And amongst other things, I look after strategy and policy and how smart meter and our network can help our stakeholder navigating through the challenges of energy transition.
And that's the big thing we're here to talk about, smart meters. So firstly, can you tell me what is the Data Communications Company?
So let me take that question. So I think DCC, first of all, it's helpful if I give some context. DCC has designed and built this smart network. So it's predominantly a telecoms network, and it reaches into all of our homes. So us as consumers and our meters in the home, right through to the DCC customers who are district network operators, energy retailers and other users.
Yeah.
And the network's there to ensure smart communication so that you can make good choices at home as to how you use your energy, and also for district network operators so they can help load and balance as well. So ultimately it's a communications company that runs communications between the meters and our DCC customers.
And it's a network across the whole of GB.
Whole of GB.
And it's a bit more than just, so for most people a smart meter is maybe that display they have that says how much energy they're using, but that's not just what a smart meter is, or the smart system. It's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Yes, and maybe just a little bit of history here. So the DCC was set up in 2013, and as you said, to build and operate the digital infrastructure that has enabled smart meter rollout across Great Britain. And since then, what we've seen is an exponential growth in terms of number of meters connected into our network. And to date, we have a little bit more than 34 million meters into our network.
34 million smart meters.
Smart meters into our
in
network.
Our homes and businesses.
That's right, yeah, mostly homes. And essentially, our fundamental job is to transport energy data from the smart meter to primarily energy supplier and the distribution network operators.
And what's the kind of scale of the data that is transported around the network?
So it's big. So although it's low size from a data perspective, it's really big from a volume perspective. So today we see around about 3 billion transactions across the network every month. That will grow to around about 7 billion by 2027 as market half-hourly settlement comes in.
And how is it communicating these things? We talk about mobile communications, but as I understand it, it is still that your SIM card that you have in your phone, very similar in a smart meter. Is that right?
It is. So we have a communications hub in the home, and in the north we have predominantly radio connectivity, and that's due to the fact that we've got quite considerable challenging geography in the north. But we have 2G, 3G across both the north and the south. And then in December last year, we introduced 4G as well. So that's just started trialing, and that will grow, and it will go into the north as well in May this year. But ultimately, it's a telecoms network.
And we'll come on to sort of a bit of those technologies later. But what do you do with the data? I mean, as you say, 33 million smart meters across, 3 billions of messages. What do you do with it?
Well, it's probably worth me explaining what the data is. So ultimately, most of the data is meter reads. So that's the energy suppliers understanding exactly what you're consuming in the home by taking meter reads. But also, as a consumer, you can top up remotely. So if you have a prepayment meter, you can top up remotely from whether it's your phone or an app. It does that as well. But from a district network operator, they are looking at power outages, power loads, voltage alerts, etc. So it's carrying lots and lots of important data across the network, and that is informing both our customers, but also you as a user at home as well. So it puts the control back in your hands as to how you want to consume your energy. So we have lots of things like, you might have heard of time of use tariffs. So you choose at what time of the day you want to use your energy. And then there's also what we call demand flexibility scheme. So again, you can choose to not use your energy for that day or for that morning, and that allows the grid to rebalance energy as well. So it's a real connected grid.
I think I've had my own real world experience of that recently. I've just got an electric car, and I got an email from the electric company to say, if you plug in tonight, you can have half price energy, but don't use it tomorrow. I mean, what's that all about?
So I think I think you alluded to that. I think the one fundamental aspect of smart meter is that it provides you with a near real-time view on your energy consumption. And I think in the context of the energy transition, providing consumer the possibility to be able to understand how much they're consuming to change their energy habits, I think is going to be extremely important. Penny mentioned the DFS, so that's one example.
What's the DFS?
The Demand Flexibility Scheme, which is a very good example. I think in 2024, 12 million pounds were paid to consumers who had been financially incentivized to shift their energy off-peak. So that's one really good example.
So real world incentives to get people to move
absolutely.
the way they use.
Real world incentive. Another example, which I think you alluded to, is what we call the low carbon technologies. For example, EV, for example, solar panels, and the smart meter is a requirement to make the best use of this. As you said, when you've got an EV, you connect the EV to the grid, and if you want to make the best use of energy consumed by your EV or exported back into the grid, you will need a smart meter in the same way that you need a smart meter to be part of the demand flexibility scheme.
Because I say my own experience there is, I plug this thing in and it decides when to charge and it decides when not to charge, and it will do some in sort of at certain times, and equally it will allow me to get the cheaper energy at certain times of either the day or night, and all done by the smart meter, which I think is generally fascinating.
And I think maybe the slightly broader point here, back to what is our role essentially as an organization. I think it's threefold. I think the first one, so as I've said, to date, we've got 34 million smart meters into our network, and our first role, of course, is to help energy suppliers completing the rollout. So that's an important role. And smart meter provides a very helpful source of data, enabling distribution network operators in particular to achieving this.
And you mentioned sort of, particularly weather is less predictable these days. We're just about, for instance, about to have a heat wave here, and we've had Storm Dara. How does smart meters help us navigate that, or like you say, ensure that the system doesn't go down?
So if I take Storm Dara that you mentioned, so that was back in December last year. And so we monitor the network 24/7, 7 days a week, and we are watching the data going across our network, and it's quite powerful. We can see the whole of GB as a map. And so when Storm Dara hit, so it was predominantly the southwest and Wales that was hit, and we saw an increase of over 270% of traffic going across our network. And what that is actually when a power outage happens, so because the storm took down power cables, the meters will alert. So in almost just before it goes off, the comms hub will alert and send a message across our network to district network operators. So a 270% increase in traffic. And what that does for the district network operators, it allows them to optimize and localize resources in the most efficient way. So they can push engineers to the most impacted areas so they can recover power as quickly as possible. So that's kind of really how the communication of our network is helping. Whereas before, obviously, it would be required on things like phone calls, etc., to say I've lost power.
So it's a much more instantaneous feedback.
Absolutely, yeah. Really
and therefore, that enables the network itself to be more resilient.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously that's when storms hit. But I mean, I imagine, does this give us more of a preemptive view of what could be happening as well? Can we learn sort of maybe the AI of sort of how things are being used and how to get there before things go down?
Yeah, so it's incredibly predictive. So actually, how we use energy, how we use it as consumers can be quite predictive. Ad breaks and things like that. People are
Cup of tea during certain soaps.
Yeah, EastEnders, things like that. So there's always that predictive nature. But also, we're constantly taking data from those meters, which is things like voltage alerts, power loads, things like that. So district network operators can use that to get a sense of actually where can they put investment into areas where actually we're getting poorer information. So there's lots of things that we can use it like that, which is more proactive than just waiting for a storm to hit and then reacting after the event.
And obviously we've talked a lot about energy, and then this podcast is more about the communication side of things. Now, I said we're going to touch on it, but I'm intrigued to see, it's 2G and 3G you're using, and we have to sort of obviously note that 2G and 3G networks ultimately are going to be sunsetted, and you've mentioned 4G as well. But I suppose intrigued as to why 4G in the first instance, how does that do, or the lower sort of data needs, you say billions of messages, but not actually large data packets themselves. And then sort of where does 5G come in?
Back in 2020 is when we started to design and look at the next technology that was going to take over from the sunset of 2G and 3G.
Yeah.
And back in 2020, we have to build business cases that demonstrate what's the scale that we're going to need, how do we make sure we're going to be economic and efficient in our use of money. So, it was too early for us to consider 5G at that point. Our business case needs to demonstrate that we can get to the scale of over 30 million homes. So we're at around about 21 million homes today. We will scale to over 30 million. And so it would just not have been economic at that point to be able to demonstrate that we could scale to 5G. But the reality of it is, when I talk about low data, the average consumption of data from a smart meter is around about 2 megabits a month. So it's very, very small. So high volume.
So as opposed, just to give listeners an idea, the average user on some networks at the moment is 25 gigabytes per month. Exactly. That's a person, so much lower than that.
Much lower. So actually, we didn't need 5G. We did not need the scale. And so from an economic and efficient perspective, it just wouldn't have been appropriate. I mean, obviously, we're now turning our gaze and we're starting to think about what's the next evolution from us from a 4G perspective. But what I would say is we have used what we call, you'll be familiar with the long-term evolution, the LTE Cat1 design, which will...
So I think we tend to term that as 4G, is it?
Yeah, but it will piggyback on 5G as well. So, there's that option as well that we've got. But right now, 4G for us is more than efficient for the data use that we use.
Excellent. And then just looking to the future, I mean, and how is, we talk about the IoT, Internet of Things. I think we're talking about connections of billions. Generally, when we talk about mobile phones and the mobile network, I think there's about 95 million subscriptions connecting to the network. But when we're talking about things, that's going to be much, much more. How's that going to impact sort of smart meters in the home and energy usage?
So we're building the future network now. So we are predominantly trying to move to cloud so that we can be much more flexible as demand grows. So I mentioned earlier that we're around about 3 billion now, but we will get over 7 billion by 2027. So that growth is traffic that's going across our network. And as more smart devices are connected, and if they connect to our network, then that will be a growth of traffic that we'll see. So moving to the cloud allows us to be much more agile in the way that we manage our capacity and demand across the network.
Okay, so we've talked about data usage. What about the social applications? Obviously government has also, is very much supportive of the smart meter network, but how does it help in its own policy initiatives?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of applications, but two at least that come to my mind. The first one is around fuel poverty, which in addition to be a societal issue, which by the way, it's not occurring only in winter, now it's throughout the year, and it's probably got worse in the last few years. But in addition to be a societal issue, it's also potentially a barrier to decarbonization. So it's really important we address that, and anything we collectively can do, I think, should be explored. Two things we can do to help addressing that. The first thing is a controlled and targeted use of our data, of the data, to help, for example, local authorities, regional organizations, charities, to better identify areas in fuel poverty, to better target the fuel poverty schemes. So that's one thing we can do. And another thing is to potentially use our network to deliver social tariffs, for example, via smart prepaid meters. So that's a first thing. And the second thing is in the areas of home energy efficiency schemes. You've kind of alluded to it. And again, improving collectively our home energy efficiency is an important enabler to decarbonization. So the more we can do in that space, the better.
So in terms of like assisting with fuel poverty, the government often provides grants, but smart meters allow you, if I'm correct, to actually then provide some of those grants through the smart meter network, making it more applicable to people and easier to generate. Is that correct?
So in 2023, the energy billing support scheme was launched. So this was again tackling the fact that people were finding and struggling with the cost of fuel. So the smart meter network was used to be able to push credit onto prepayment meters. So there's about £5.3 million added to meters during, I think it was the winter months, so it's around about October through to February. Directly through to people's homes. So it was a great initiative, and that's the kind of policy opportunity that the smart DCC and the data,
which wouldn't be possible without a smart meter network.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. And one other question I really want to get onto is, we live in a slightly less stable world geopolitically at the moment, and we have a nation connected via smart meter network. Can you reassure listeners about security of the network? Yeah,
happy to take that question. So we take it really seriously. It's one of the what we'd say was our USP, from a data network perspective. So we're highly secure. So it was designed in conjunction with GCHQ.
Okay.
It's a dedicated network. It's a private network, and it's encrypted end to end. So you actually cannot connect to the smart meter network unless you're a certified user and you have an encryption and certification. And that's both from a device perspective and also from a user perspective. So every energy supplier has a unique certification, and that's how they connect to the network.
So one of the things I also wanted to sort of touch on was what are the opportunities that are coming down the line? We live in a world where we don't necessarily get energy now just from a big power, coal power station or nuclear power station. We can have local generation, and equally, we're moving to a stage where, say, we mentioned my electric vehicle. I've got a big battery on my driveway. In times of if there are a power out, can I use that power back into the grid? And again, how does the smart meter help that?
So the short answer is yes, you can. So how the smart meter network help, I think, in a number of ways. First of all, as I've said, it provides you almost a real-time information of how much you're consuming, and therefore it gives you the ability to be more in control of your energy consumption, and shift away at certain time of the day or certain time of the night, where you as a consumer want to either import energy from the grid or export to the grid. And there's lots of energy suppliers who are proposing you as a consumer different tariffs. And in order to make the best out of these schemes, you need a smart meter. So that's a first application. I think maybe the second application related to that a little bit, I think, is in relation to your home energy efficiency, how efficient you are at home from an energy perspective. And we know that is an important enabler to achieving decarbonization. And a number of things that our network could do in the future is, for example, transmitting additional energy information, for example, around the temperatures in your home, the humidity in your home, which are very interesting energy efficiency metrics that could be used either by consumers or, for example, regional authority, charity, local organization to help improve energy efficiency in your home.
Brilliant. Well, this has been fascinating. I think we could talk about this for hours. It's clearly a benefit to how we utilize energy, what we know about energy, and great that it's backed up by mobile networks. And this is, I think, as we move to 4G, only become more advanced as we go forward. So, firstly, thank you very much, Penny. Thank you very much, Stev.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, once again. This is another Live Better Connected podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and like that button, and I will see you next time. Thank you.